everybody, and welcome to the Hotel Business Hot Topics virtual panel series. I, of course, am Glenn Haussman. I'm excited to be here today, not necessarily for the reasons that you think. Turns out, my first job in the hospitality industry was with the good folks at Hotel Business Magazine back in the grunge era. Yeah, I wore a lot of plaid and flannel and stuff like that. But I was young and I was enthusiastic, and I loved the opportunity to get to come into this amazing business by working with the great folks over at Hotel Business Magazine. Since then, I've gone on to do other things. You might recognize me from hosting No Vacancy Live, our comedy and cocktail show, Friday Night Audit, the Hotel Tech Podcast Influencer Series, and of course, the Hotel Design Podcast. You can check that out at novacancynews.com. But today is about our amazing guests. Speaking of guests, today more than ever, that focus is on customer satisfaction, right? And for hoteliers, that means removing friction from the experience to create something seamless, right? The trend of creating a home away from home, that's more of an expectation than it's ever been before. It used to be people go to hotels and see things that they don't have at their own home. But now we have everything, particularly coming out of this crisis that we've experienced over the last 2 years. So hotels must not only deliver on current expectations, but exceed those expectations if they want to get repeat business and get folks coming back again and again. Guests want the hotel to be able to function as it would in their houses. So hoteliers need to ensure the transition from home to hotel is convenient, consistent, uninterrupted, easy, and of course, enjoyable. And innovative technology and enhanced in-room entertainment are paramount to achieving that customer satisfaction. And of course, a happy guest makes for a happy hotelier. The fact is, when I'm in hotels, I love to be able to relax and have that experience like I'm having at home. And when I don't have that experience, well, it kind of upset. So this hot topic session is going to dig deeper into that topic, providing insights and ideas on how to create that seamless stay we all need in our lives. So let me introduce our panelists. Starting off, we've got newly inducted Hall of Famer for technology, Jeff Bezofka, CEO of Nolan. We got John Giegengak, founder principal of Hub Entertainment Research. Ms. Kim Twiggs, Associate VP of DirecTV Hospitality. Dan Morton, VP Guest Experience with Hilton. And Stephanie Maniscalco, Senior Director of Technology Sourcing with Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. Now I'm going to get to them in a minute, and I feel badly that you guys are sitting there staring out there, but we're going to go over this format real quick. We're going to be done within the hour, and you can ask them questions. And that to me makes for a really good session, but you have to put it in the Q&A box, not that chat box, for us to be able to see it. And I really want to be able to answer as many of those questions that you have. So not only do we want to take you home with easily implementable ideas for your business, but also address the concerns that you have. Also, if you want to get a follow-up on this, it'll be in the July issue of Hotel Business on hotelbusiness.com, as well as wherever you connect with them on social media. Of course, it's being recorded and is available on demand online. I'd like to very much thank our good folks over at DirecTV for being a great partner for today's panel discussion. All right, you guys ready to start, or should I just talk for another 45 minutes and then wrap this thing up?
You did that with a single breath, Glenn. Pretty cool.
Woo! That was rough. I was trying to channel that, my favorite YouTube star, the way that these things go. Now, Jeff, you opened your mouth, so I'm going to have to ask you the first question. What does it really mean to create a seamless stay today?
So lesson learned. I'll remember that the next time, Glenn. I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
It's like we've been through this before you knew, Jeff.
I set myself up.
Yeah.
So, creating a seamless, stay. First thing maybe to comment on.
Right.
At times interchanging the word seamless and contactless, and really we need to separate the two. And there's been, hyper focus about contactless lately, but seamless is all about how we deliver, and it's about enabling choice, but in a seamless manner. Mm-hmm. Technology at times, well intended, it's poorly delivered and poorly executed. So seamless, in my view, is really about enabling choice for the guests. We're all in a different place. We're all staying for different reasons, and it's meeting and matching our expectations. And it's not just about getting the technology in place,
Mhm.
but it's ensuring that that technology works and you continue to monitor it and ensure that you're getting the intended outcome. So as I look at seamless, it's more about frictionless
Yep.
and delivering and getting that intended result.
So, Dan, being that you are the VP guest experience with Hilton, how would you define contactless versus this frictionless seamlessness that we've been talking about so far?
So yeah, so contactless is a really specific term, right? And when we talk about contactless arrival, we're talking about enabling a guest to go straight to their room, to check in, to get their key, go straight to their room, without having to make contact with people. At the same time, seamless is a much bigger discussion, right? Seamless integrates our people and our technologies together into an overall experience. You know, in the hotel business, we all know that we're in the business of people serving people, right?
Yep.
And we want to make that as easy as possible, and we want to make that seamless both for the team members and for the guests, so the guest knows what's next, how to do that. They don't have to ask questions or have questions and concerns about what they're going to do the next thing they want to do when they're on a property, right?
Right.
They want to be able to engage our staff and our great team members. They also want to be able to engage technologies to do various things and provide them information and access and other things during their stay. And we want to make that as easy and as seamless as possible. Yeah.
That's right. I love the word frictionless, because if you can make it easier for the guests, create that seamlessness, you're going to go a whole lot further. Now, before we continue, I'd like to encourage all of you again, put your question into the question box, the Q&A box, so we can answer your specific questions to make this session as satisfying for you as possible. John, I got to ask you, being that you research this stuff as the founder of Hub Entertainment Research, what are guests really expecting from hotels delivering to meet that demand right now?
Well, I think there's two things. You know, one that we found from this particular study that we did among hotel guests in particular, but it's also reflected in the work that we do among entertainment consumers in general.
Right.
And one is that the pandemic really turbocharged some of the trends that were going on already. So in particular, the movement of the center of gravity of TV entertainment, at least from traditional cable or satellite or broadcast TV to different streaming platforms. So the number of streaming platforms that the average person uses more than doubled between 2018 and 2022, and most of that growth came during the was a byproduct of the pandemic. Things were moving that way anyhow, but it really turbocharged it.
Right.
The other thing is that is what you guys were talking about a second ago about frictionless, is that as people adopt more of these platforms and they become more ubiquitous, the definition of what constitutes a lot of effort to use something changes, and people become quickly very accustomed to a high level of convenience, a high level of access, and anything that is even the tiniest speed bump becomes, goes from a molehill to a mountain in their minds.
Dude,
so
I'm laughing because it is so true. Yeah. People's patience level are at an all-time low, I think. Some of it's caused by what we just went through in the last 2 years. Some of it, I think, is just caused by the rapidity of modern society, right?
You're 100% correct. That's what we found. And that, something that might distinguish you and differentiate you today, in a couple of years might very quickly just become something that people expect to have. And it's the only way it's going to be differentiated, and if you don't have it, it's conspicuous in its absence.
Right. Absolutely. Now we got our first question, but I want to make sure that we hear from Stephanie and Kim before we start getting to those questions. Stephanie, so how do you think, since you're out there sourcing the technology, how does all of this play into what you're doing and what you think the hoteliers that have committed to the Wyndham family of products are wanting?
Yeah, what I think is interesting about these buzzwords, which are really important in changing our guest expectations, is our hotels catching up to deliver those buzzwords. Seamless and frictionless isn't delivered without the proper backbone and network technology to deliver the seamless stay experience. So for us here at Wyndham, where we have a wide breadth of property types from economy to luxury, what we're having to work towards is helping our owners and general managers understand what's required to get there. Let's take a multi-phased approach to eventually meet the customer needs, because some of the challenges are going to be we don't have the physical infrastructure to support that frictionless, seamless experience. And we do have to still deliver the, let's call it the today more traditional experience. So what we're trying to accomplish is a multi-phased strategy that gets us there and meets this very varied guest type that we have across our portfolio.
Excellent. So Kim, how does DirecTV fit into satisfying customers then?
Yeah, I would echo what Stephanie and Jeff were both talking about, with technology being core to creating this seamless experience from home to hotel for a guest. And Jeff said it perfectly when he said, not only does the technology need to be there, but it needs to work. And so DirecTV is absolutely focused on kind of consistency of delivery, and making sure that not only are we delivering sort of the next big thing and being on the cutting edge of that technology, but making sure that the performance is consistent. Adding to that, I think the next most important thing is that technology is affordable. We're in a time right now where cost pressures are at an all-time high on the consumer level, but also on the business owner level. And so it's the responsibility of providers like DirecTV and others in the space to make sure that we're removing that burden, removing that barrier of CapEx, to make sure that this latest and greatest technology that performs consistently is also affordable and accessible to hotels all across the U.S.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, these days I think it's cheaper to build a hotel than to fill up my gas tank over there. So I know exactly what you're thinking about, Kim. All right, our first question, and Dan, this one is going to be for you. I had a feeling he was frozen and left. So we'll wait on that first question to ask Dan. So let me go back to you, Jeff. What are you folks doing to help companies achieve this objective of seamlessness?
Yeah, and this is an area where I'm going to maybe dip into my past and talk a little bit in my former life. Prior to joining Noland, I was Senior Vice President of Global Hotel Technology at Hyatt, and we were focused on bringing experiences to life and building upon what Stephanie said. It does start with infrastructure. You can have a great marketing vision and a brand vision, but without the infrastructure to deliver that, it's problematic and challenging. So, part of it is taking an assessment of initially what you have available. And one of the first things when I joined Hyatt, realized just how important the Wi-Fi was, and at that time it was evolving to just as important as running water and electricity and flipping the light switch.
Jeff, how many years were we saying Wi-Fi is it's a utility? Stop thinking of it as something separate.
Yeah, exactly. And it took some time to convince owners and operators.
There's still a couple that we have to convince, but that's unfortunately getting to be the smaller minority at this point.
Tell me, if I make that upgrade to the infrastructure, do I need to do anything else for 7 years? I'm like, well, if you want to fill a hotel then with happy guests, yes, you do. But part of it is standardization. And when I originally joined, we had nearly 100 different providers in the space of the services itself. And knowing we wanted to provide this friction-free experience where a guest walks in one hotel, authenticates once, and then the ability to never authenticate again as they go from hotel to hotel. And it started with cleaning up, the infrastructure and standardization and bringing that in. So job one was creating that friction-free environment from a Wi-Fi standpoint. John made the comment earlier about guests having their own streaming solutions and content they want to bring. Rather than trying to pigeonhole guests into an experience that we want to deliver, you need to open up a platform to be able to enable that, and ensuring whatever streaming solutions you put in place, that they meet the guests where they are. So it's really understanding and designing solutions more with the guest experience in mind versus starting with the technology.
Interesting. Kim, I'd love to go back to you. What is it that you think guests are looking for that plays into what Jeff was saying?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. To me, it's there's two components. There's what they want to watch, and there's how they want to watch it, or what device they want to watch it on. And so I think DirecTV is focused on both of these places, giving guests access to all the content they have at home and even more content that they don't have in their homes through one seamless, easy to use, easy to navigate interface. And the second component is on the TV. We know that consumers at home and in the hotel room choose the largest screen in the room to watch the content that they're interested in watching. And so whether it's live linear content, on-demand series, streaming services that they're subscribed to or that are made available by the hotel, we want to make sure that all of those are available through a singular interface and also available on that biggest screen in the room on the hotel TV.
Right. Now, Kim, this is my favorite friend, my iPad over here. Mostly my best friend because humans won't talk to me. But I've been dying to like be able to watch stuff on the big TV, but I've felt that friction. So share a little bit about how you're removing that to make it so I can just plop down and do what I need to do and not have to worry about all that other stuff.
Absolutely. So a technology that is gaining more and more traction in the space today is casting. So taking that content that you have on your iPad and casting it to the TV or from your phone to the TV. The use of QR codes is starting to make this easier, but to your point, it's still a little bit of friction, right? Especially depending on a guest comfort level with that type of technology. So as DirecTV continues down our product roadmap path, we want to make sure that we can take the content that you have on your iPad and intuitively serve it up to you on the screen in the guest room by making all of those apps available through a singular interface. Casting is certainly a way to get there today, using your device as a remote control, basically, to see what you want to see. But the future is really having all of those streaming services aggregated into that singular experience on the TV in the room.
I'd say shout out to the QR code for making the biggest comeback since John Travolta's career in the late 1990s. Go there.
Yeah, I'm guilty, Glenn, of telling in a former life, QR codes, they're going away. We're not going to do anything with them. If I could pull that back, I would.
That's crazy. So, Dan, I got a question for you in just a minute. Welcome back. I'm glad that you got your technology fixed. But Stephanie, let me ask you, being that you have properties that run the whole gambit, how are you thinking about satisfying guests in this particular way? Is it any different between a Super 8 hotel and a Wyndham hotel and a Wyndham hotel?
It is very different. And that's the strategy conversation that we're having across our brand leadership and operational team. But back to our multi-phase approach and where we are today, what we implemented last year was increasing our Wi-Fi minimum standards. And so that's where we direct our properties on, what's the bare minimum that our guests need to deliver the minimum experience. And today, what you will get in the basic DirecTV packaging in a linear format is that minimum Wi-Fi experience. So now as we work towards 22 and 23 strategy conversations, we're exploring with DirecTV, if our brand standard is here for a Wi-Fi bandwidth minimum, where does it need to be to deliver these enhanced guest experiences? And we, as an organization that supports such a wide range of guest users and experiences, we will have a varied strategy based on property segmentation. So the current strategy and experience that you see today may very well work for our Super 8s, for our Days Inn. And when you go up to, say, a La Quinta or even higher to the Dolce or the Wyndham Grands, that's where we would expect to see some of the higher packages that DirecTV offers.
Right.
But we need to set the ground rules of what are the minimum configurations. And we do that through our standards. And thus we have a multi-year strategy to keep increasing those so that the guest experience improves and we can opt in to some of these enhanced entertainment experiences.
That's great. Some of the hotels I've stayed in, there's still some ways to go. But John, let me get you back in the conversation here. What is the bare minimum these days? Because I'm not just taking my iPad with me. I've got my phone that I'm connecting. I've got my laptop that I'm connecting. And God forbid, I bring my whole family around. We might be using a whole lot of stuff all at once. what do you think hotels should be doing now to be able to be present today and continue to build on that enhanced experience?
Well, one of the things that we found, and this is something that we find in our research among consumers when they're not at hotels as well, is that even though there is a lot of buzz, or has been a lot of buzz about people sort of deserting TV sets and watching everything on their mobile devices that they carry around, we're still pretty far away from the point at which you'd want to abandon TV sets in the hotel room. So about 3/4 of travelers say that a TV set in the room is essential or very important. 43% of people say that it's essential; they just can't do without it.
Yep.
So, in terms of looking to save money, that's not one of the things that should be cut. What we're also finding is that when we tested different features that people said would influence their choice of where to stay, the two features that had the biggest impact that people said were the most appealing were ones that had to do with, just as a couple of people have said already, that let them aggregate traditional TV, so broad or cable, and local content from wherever they're staying, together with streaming content from a bunch of the different providers that they use. And I think that is because that's the way that they're used to watching at home. And they want to be able to take that with them on the road, ideally with as frictionless as possible of a login, and to be able to watch through their own accounts and their own profile so they can pick up where they left off if that's possible.
Right.
People are interested in things like casting, but that is not as the people that are interested in that, really want to do it. So I think it's important, depending on what kind of hotel you're in, to have that capability. But that is not, the appeal of that is not as universal across all the guests as was the aggregation of traditional and streaming TV together.
That's a fascinating observation. I didn't realize that. Kim, does that surprise you at all? Or, being with DirecTV, you probably already know all this.
No, I think John's been a great research partner for us, having access to that data, as well as data from Parks and Associates, some additional research that we've gotten recently. The numbers are very, very high, showing not only, like he said, the use of the in-room TV being very important, but also, access to all of this different type of content that they're looking for. And in many cases, over 40% of hotel respondents in the Parks and Associates data showed that they want access to content that they don't have at home. And so you can see that entertainment is still very core to the guest experience inside the hotel room. They still very much rely on the TV as a source of satisfaction and a source of entertainment.
I think that's a really a terrific observation there, because the whole point of going to the hotel, as we mentioned at the beginning, is to have more than you have experiences than you could traditionally have at home. So how cool is that to be able to open people up to new programs, new channels, new services, all of that. And then they could go home. And if they get that service, they're going to remember not just DirecTV, but the brand that they stayed in with as well. Dan, we got a question for you coming from someone in the audience. What is Hilton doing to assist guests for seamless transactions and providing reliable guest technologies that are both cost efficient for hoteliers and secure for guest use?
Oh, for sure. Thanks, Glenn. We're looking across the entire experience from once you booked all the way through getting to your room, in your room, and then to check out and so on. Many of you may be familiar or not with the vast majority of our properties do enable you to do digital check-in, get a digital key. You may choose to go to the front desk, or you may not, and we want to make that easy for either situation for the guests. We also want to make sure that we're empowering our team members to be able to help guests with whichever journey they want. And then when they get to their room, consistent with what we've just been hearing people saying, we're our connected room platform that we've been deploying and are continuing to deploy across our estate enables the aggregation of live TV with streaming TV, some premium content for free, and then access to your own content as well. And we've been looking at a lot of the research, probably much of what everyone else has been looking at, and trying to make it as easy as possible. And that goes all the way down to the interface level, right? We need the interface in the room to be fast and responsive, and it needs to be as good or better than what you've come to expect at your house. An observation I'd make is when you connect something to your TV at your house, you may give yourself a few days, right, to learn it and figure
Oh,
out
yeah.
how it works and all that. When you go to a
Yeah.
hotel, you're there for a
Oh,
night
yeah,
or two.
Dan, if I haven't figured it out in about 3 seconds, I hate everything.
Absolutely. And so it's really important that we get it exactly right away for our guests.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I love the fact that Dan is bringing in the importance of the colleague and the overall experience. Oftentimes that is forgotten. I had a hotel stay at a major brand that doesn't happen to be represented here today, or one that I formerly worked at, but the mobile key did not work. And I went to the front desk and I asked a question, and the person said, "Well, I don't know anything about mobile key. Let me give you this plastic key card."
Right.
So that is, as a guest, that is a disappointment. As somebody in hospitality technology, that is an extreme disappointment. But Glenn, to your point, you may use it once, you may try for 3 seconds, some a little bit more patient than you, 30 seconds.
Right.
But that's going to be a bad experience. And then well-intended technology ends up being a distractor versus part of the stay itself. But love the fact that Dan brings in the importance of engaging the colleague as part of the overall experience.
And that is a great point. I was at a major casino resort last fall on 2 separate stays. I went with the plastic key because I'm a little bit of a Luddite when it comes to stuff like that. But everybody was holding up their phones and they weren't doing it right in the elevators. And all it did was create a lot of anger and frustration. So if you're going ahead and trying to put in a technology that doesn't work right, you may be well-intentioned, but it might wind up putting you in a worse position than you were before. Stephanie, how do you avoid that potential trap?
And it is a challenge. I was just in a meeting 2 hours ago talking about specifically with the digital key and, lack of adoption because the front desk agent has extra work on their plate to even offer it. So what we are doing, and it's still strategy because, it's new technology for a lot of us, certainly for a lot of our properties. What we're doing is we're working with the manufacturers to determine how can we simplify the process, eliminate redundancy, eliminate the extra steps for our staff because they don't have the time and bandwidth to do it. We're all understaffed in our hotels. So we can't ask them to do twice the work for what they already know and can eat and breathe. So it's really about partnering with our strategic suppliers like DirecTV on the in-room entertainment experience, partnering with our suppliers there to figure out what is the easiest path to deliver, what removes redundancy, extra steps, and really how can we reduce the friction? Because it is there in all of these technologies we're talking about, it's there. So I think these types of conversations are great to share what are some of these ideas that might reduce the friction. I know some of the conversation that I was having earlier with one of our partners for Digital Key was around having PMS integrations because it's an optional component right now. And for us, if we decide that that's a requirement, it will reduce some of those manual steps that our staff are having to perform and increase the guest experience. So that's just one example specific to that component. I think on the DirecTV piece where we've been partnering with them to understand all their different offerings, and Kim mentioned it earlier, and I love it. Some of the packages that they're offering are no upfront capital costs. I mean, that's a great way to get the technology back-end infrastructure that is critical to deliver these experiences, but make it easy for our owners to acquire that infrastructure because it's high costs. So I'm excited that soon we'll be offering some no-cost options through DirecTV to improve the experience.
Well, that's pretty cool. Dan, how are you seeing that, bridging the gap between Hilton's needs to satisfy all their customers and the owners' needs as well?
So we're always looking at all of the various technologies that we can in order to try to find the most efficient, most cost-effective solution that still meets our guest needs. We also know that the whole business is it's a cycle, right? We need satisfied guests in order to bring more guests in order to have more guests want to come, which then brings more revenue, and our owners are happier from that as well. So there's always the balance that we need to make and take to make sure that our owners are able to gain what they expect out of the investment that they're making, while at the same time meeting the needs of our guests. And a lot of that is, how do we support them? How do we find the right cost structure? How do we ensure that things are working, and that the upgrade cycles are appropriate for the hotel and the class of hotel as well.
One of the things that I like, and I'm curious, Kim, if you guys have this functionality, is there are certain brands out there, no matter which property I go to, I don't have to worry about the signing in and stuff. Is that something that you're seeing that's becoming more popular?
Yeah, that's certainly contributing to the seamless, frictionless experience when a guest doesn't have to recall their login.
I can't stand it. You have to click through 1,000 approvals and stuff like that.
That's right. And who remembers their passwords anyway? So it's really hard.
Well, I just use password because that way nobody will know what it is.
Good to know. Now we all have access to Glenn's bank account. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Make sure you bring some tissues when you see what the balance is in there. All right.
Yeah, it's definitely been core to our strategy. The platform that Stephanie was just mentioning, which thank you, Stephanie, so much for that. Our advanced entertainment platform, core to that development has been bringing as many login lists, forms, and sources of content to the platform as possible to ease that particular pain point for guests. And so what you'll see on AEP, Advanced Entertainment Platform today, is Showtime content with no login required. All of the Hallmark Crown Media titles and movies available, music choice in the room with no login required. And we are just now launching Netflix. Now that is credential required, and that's because some content providers and programmers require that. But going forward, you will see DirecTV bring to the table even more content sources that don't require a login to eliminate that pain point. Because to your point, you're going to give it a few seconds and then you're going to give up. So we want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible.
And if I can't, Jeff, go on.
I was just going to piggyback on what Kim said, and again, that's all about removing the friction and creating a seamless experience. And we spoke earlier on the importance of the colleague. We also have to rely on guest behavioral changes, and if it's going to deviate from what they experience at home, you have to invest in communicating and getting that change. Or just a real quick story. I was at an independent hotel a couple of weeks ago in Boston, beautiful hotel. I was super excited that in-room dining showed up with a tablecloth and a real table and real china and not in a bag. But on the table, there was a little call button. And usually you have the little table temp that says, for tray removal, call here. Nobody uses it and they roll it out in the hallway. There was a little button, push here for tray removal. And the attendant did a great job explaining it. And after I finished a wonderful breakfast, I pushed it. 4 minutes, the same attendant showed up and super excited, almost a bit giddy, going, we've had it in place now for 6 months. You're the first guest who actually pushed the damn button. And awesome. Thinking, it's like, okay, the hotel invested in the technology, but it goes unused. So part of it, we also need to keep in mind, not just the colleague, but also how do you get the guest to do it? And to Kim's point, removing the password sign-ins and that clunkiness is so important.
Right, John, I got to bring this back to you. What is your research saying in things that guests say they want or hotels think they want, as opposed to what everybody really needs to create a seamless and positive stay?
Well, I mean, one of the things for sure is that, and that story reminded me of this from our study, so there is a lot of technology that different types of people want. There are segments of the guest population that want them more than others. And there's certainly the potential, if you roll out some of these features for everybody, that you're going to invest in some pretty expensive capabilities, but maybe that not everyone, or at least not across all kinds of properties, are going to adopt them. So in our research, we found that among the segments who have the greatest desire for the features that we tested and who said that those features would have the biggest impact on whether they choose one property over another, some of the segments that really over-indexed on that were people that were younger travelers, people that were traveling on business, and people that are frequent travelers, especially if they're part of a loyalty program.
Right.
They way over-index on almost all of the different features that we tested. And that suggests to me that, A, these things are really important to keep your best customers satisfied, but also that there's the opportunity, as one of the other speakers said, to kind of roll those out in judicious ways. So to pick the segments and pick the properties and the brands that are serving the customers where that's going to have the biggest impact, and start with those people and kind of work out the rest over time.
Excellent. John, while I got your attention, we got a great question. I want to thank everybody for bringing in their questions. I'm going to try to get to all of them if possible. Other than TV and streaming, John, what type of entertainment or services have you seen guests express interest in having in their hotel room, and I'll add, or across the property in general?
Well, we looked at things like gaming. So gaming has had a huge expansion.
When you say gaming, do you mean like Nintendo, or do you mean like poker and blackjack?
I mean, not poker and blackjack. I mean, like
because some hotels are doing gaming on site. Those
are still popular. But video games have gotten really popular. They were growing really rapidly anyway, and the pandemic turbocharged that, just the way it did streaming TV.
Yep.
And I think we're going to see that grow even more as cloud gaming, where you don't have to have a console and all the gaming takes place on the internet. That's going to maybe increase that traction even more. But that's something, again, where if you've got a kid staying there and he's used to playing Fortnite on his laptop, right, and that's a pretty demanding thing when it comes to bandwidth, and any lag or breakdown in the connectivity is something that it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. So I think that's one thing that we've seen, not across the board and not necessarily among like business travelers, for example, but something that is a pursuit and a priority that's growing really, really fast among consumers in general. And across all the research we've done in this space, we've seen that as soon as something becomes important outside the hotel, it filters down, relatively quickly to something that they want to have, and then to something they expect to have while they're on the road.
That's interesting. Dan, it's not so long ago, I remember seeing some of those types of things in hotels, not necessarily at Hilton or Wyndham or wherever. How are you seeing that right now in creating experiences?
In terms of gaming,
yeah,
we know that guests sometimes bring their own devices with them as well, right? We see people plugging in their Xboxes and their PlayStations.
What if I bring it in television? Can we do that?
You know what? You can bring whatever you want, Glenn, and we'll do our best to accommodate you. And if it doesn't plug into the TV, they'll
probably won't, because you remember back in the day, they had those wires that you had to put in there and screw them in. So I'm guessing your TVs don't have those anymore.
Yeah, probably not. No bunny ears anymore, thanks to, in part, present company.
Yay, DirecTV.
but yeah, we see. I think we see a lot of interest in a lot of things, right? And I think the majority, most guests are covered with TV and streaming. People also like having music. There are a lot of other use cases that we pay attention to and we're watching, and we need to think about how it connects into, again, gaming. Maybe you just want to play the random game on the TV that's there, or maybe it's actually, the question would be, is there a way to get the game that I already play onto the TV, right? And so there's a lot in there that's not really there yet necessarily, and we're not sure where it's going to go from a hospitality standpoint. But it's a great and interesting question.
So Kim, besides the gaming thing, what other types of entertainment content are people really interested in seeing?
Yeah, so really interesting what the research that John was talking about. We have two sets of data that we're looking at. So kind of right in the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, we did some research on what types of content guests were looking to consume, both at home and in the room, and on what device they were looking to consume it on. And we just refreshed that data again in 2022. And so what is so interesting is there's many different kinds of entertainment content that you can access. And accessing all of these different types of content are up 2022 versus 2020, and also up viewership on the TV versus the personal device. So you're talking about your iPad earlier, but what the data is showing us in the trends is that guests are consuming more and more content, all different types, and also they're migrating even more to watching it on the big screen. So you're talking about streaming TV, live TV, on-demand content, remote DVR content, YouTube, even pay-per-view in the hotel room. It's all up versus 2 years ago. And so all those different types of content guests are still hungry for, which we found very, very interesting. Hungry for all these different types of content, even though it seems like there's such a proliferation, but definitely still interested in the variety and interested in watching it on the big screen.
I think it's a really good point that you make. And I think as we are shifting as a society, and we're seeing the rise of that digital nomad that we had pre-pandemic, that's really now coming to the fore, people are mixing work and leisure. I'm not going to say that word that I can't stand over there. But with that happening, Stephanie, let me ask you, how are you thinking about pulling this all together now that people are finding more of an emphasis on being in the room alone as opposed to necessarily being in the lobby alone together?
Yeah, well, what's interesting about the Wyndham portfolio and the pandemic impact is that we had a lot of families traveling to our hotels because we are all over the country. We're very much a road trip type stay, right? So when across the country people were traveling in that capacity, we did see a lot more guests in the room. To your point, they are enjoying the property, right? They're not just hanging out in the room, they're hanging out in the lobby, they're hanging outside by whatever amenities are available. So the experience does need to be accessible, not just in the room, but across the property, because you know, typically a business traveler, at least my opinion, might be there in the room and they're out. You know, the family traveler, which is more our typical traveler for a lot of our properties, they are utilizing every space within the property. So we have to ensure, again, back to the infrastructure, that it can support that continuation of the seamless stay and accessing the entertainment outside of the room. And that's through their own devices primarily.
Interesting. John, I'm curious, are you seeing any difference in traveler type driving content consumption, such as hotel locations, urban versus rural versus suburban, that sort of a thing?
We mostly looked at differences between, well, business and leisure to some extent. Business travelers, like I mentioned, were a little bit more likely to care about some of these entertainment-based offerings, but leisure people over-indexed on some of them as well. And I guess the most important thing to point out is that as especially streaming TV, and that the average person is using some combination of regular cable or satellite plus streaming platforms, that's just happening across the board. So there is no segment of traveler that does not want, if not expect, access to all these kinds of platforms, and even the ability to watch those on the TV set. Even things like YouTube, which got started off on computers and moved from there to something that was primarily consumed on mobile devices. Right. The majority of YouTube now, especially if you're talking about young people, is watched on the TV set. Yep. So, and that's something that young folks allocate as much time to social media video or YouTube as they do to traditional TV shows. So I think it's really important to understand how just the baseline of what entertainment, what even is the definition of entertainment, right, is changing, and how that is migrating from how it works at home to what these people expect when they're traveling.
That's a really great point. And I guess what we're really talking about is how younger people, those the folks that I see as digital natives, act very differently than other older folks that were before the internet. A quick non-scientific study, but of all the Haussman children, I have twins that are just graduating high school tomorrow, and they never, ever watched traditional TV shows. I could have told you the primetime lineup for all the major networks throughout the 70s and 80s, right? But now they don't watch any of those shows. John, it's all YouTube, YouTube, YouTube. And you're right. We've got nice TV downstairs. That's what they watch on that TV, yep, or on their computers or mobile devices at home. Kim, is that affecting the way you see things on a generational basis?
Yeah, it's certainly becoming table stakes. I think we need to make sure that we're putting all the right types of content on the TV in the hotel room so that we're addressing these different audiences. To John's point, we've seen sort of this inclination towards technology and aggregation of content skew higher in the younger generations, in business travelers, and in loyalty members. We haven't done a cut of the data yet, urban versus rural, but I think that's a great takeaway for me in this study. Obviously, super helpful data for hoteliers to know as they're segmenting their base, like Stephanie said, is there a propensity for one type of technology implementation or preference for entertainment content in urban versus rural. So we'll certainly take that back and take a look at the data that way. But I think the very basic answer to your question is all of these different apps, the streaming ones in particular, they're becoming table stakes in the hotel room. Knowing that the guests want to use that TV, you've got to have them all available.
Yeah, the fact is, Jeff, right? Every person wants whatever they want to be accommodated, right?
Yeah, and thanks for tossing me that one.
Yeah, because I'm curious as to what you're thinking about regarding groups and all of this.
Well, first, it's our job, whether it's on the hotelier side or hospitality technology provider, has gotten so much more difficult, and it's not just because of the pandemic and the cost constraints, but the guests are changing and rapidly evolving, and they're multi-dimensional, and even in a single stay, and we won't use that B word, Glenn.
Thank you.
I'd like to see your head explode, but it's a scenario.
It might make for good entertainment, especially on a big screen TV in a hotel.
So it's all about meeting guests where they are. However, and Kim brought it up earlier, you have to balance the reality of how much the hotels and the owners can afford, and trying to find that balance. Yeah. And I think with content, and I think John mentioned earlier, the TVs, a nice piece of glass will be table stakes for a long, long period of time. Trying to determine what content a guest wants, it could almost be a fool's errand, and it's more enabling the ability for the guests to push their own content and enabling that choice itself. Group is evolving as well, and guest experiences and group members are attending when they're coming from home. It's not home away from home. They're also bringing their office with them. They may be bringing their family. So we're seeing that same type of feedback either from meeting planners or the guests themselves who are attending groups and conventions. So, it is a challenge, but I think at the core of what we're talking about as well, this is about enabling choice, meeting guests where they are, the brands that do a better job in creating true personalized experiences through these various channels in a seamless manner will win. So what's also critical to what we're talking about is access to the data. But it's not just access to the data, it's about the actionable insights. How can we learn from the activities? Who's using mobile key? What does their profile look like? How can we get more people to look that way? And I think all too often as an industry, we are focused on getting something to put into place versus then taking the time to understand and dive into the data to understand, are we getting the intended outcome that's experienced? And how can we turn data into actionable insights to make it that much better? So that's part of this mechanism as well. So there's a lot of questions and problems in that, no answers, but back to you, Glenn.
Yeah, all right, that makes a lot of sense. Dan, I'm going to throw it to you with a little bit of a different twist, actionable insights and stuff. So a question we have here from one of the audience members is, do you find that guests are preferring to use self-service devices or other technology for support rather than have face-to-face interactions from staff? And then I will add to that, is it generational? Is there any demographic or psychographic that points in any of those directions?
First, it's a great question, and I don't think there's not an answer that answers for all guests, right?
Yes, of course.
We know this, and it's not even purely generational. Yes, younger generations have more preference to self-serve perhaps, and more preference overall to using technology over the course of their stay. But I think you also find plenty of older guests that prefer that, and plenty of younger guests that prefer the other way. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I don't think we're anywhere near in my lifetime not having a mix of humans and technology to make the stay actually the stay that you want.
Right.
And even if, I mean, look at, I can take myself, for example, maybe not surprisingly, I use digital check-in and digital key, but I actually prefer going and asking at the front desk, where should I go eat dinner, instead of hopping onto some app to look for a recommendation. I just prefer that kind of engagement, right?
Well, the fact of the matter is, those eating, trust everybody, because they are not as discriminating about certain cuisines as I am. So, Stephanie, Dan's saying a lot of interesting things in that regard. How are you thinking about it at Wyndham Hotels and Resorts to kind of be able to appeal to those people that want a little bit more independence from talking to people at the property level?
Texting. That's where our heads are going. We're actively exploring how to potentially standardize, centralize a texting solution. It's available optionally at a lot of our properties. We have several partners that we are working with today to deliver that option. But we, at a corporate enterprise level, we're working towards integrating it as a standard option, that it's there for all of our guests, so that they have the ability, to Dan's point, they can either go downstairs or they can stay in their room and text us to say, hey, I'm having an issue with this, that, or the other. So that's the solution in our minds, and we feel that it's a necessity, and we're intending to get there.
Glenn, can I ask Stephanie
Yes,
a quick follow-on question on that?
Yeah.
So on guest behavior and texting, and that's predominant, especially in North America, how are you viewing other messaging platforms? So a guest may want to use WeChat or WhatsApp instead of texting. How do you look at that so not to force the change of behavior of the guest?
I think that's dependent upon the solutions or solution that we partner with, and their ability to integrate and kind of have that, flag, that checkbox of my preferred delivery channel. So, that's a fantastic point, Jeff. And it really comes down to the technology partners that we select in our roles and doing the research. So quite honestly, we're in a research mode right now for the best in class solution that can deliver all those needs. And that's going to go right on the list, top of the list. So thank you for that idea.
Kim, how are you thinking about this?
So,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Kim. No, go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I was just going to build on what you were saying earlier, Dan, that it really is a mixed bag of guests who are preferring kind of this contactless, not needing to stop in at the front desk, not needing to interact with anyone. It's half and half. And I agree with you. In our lifetime, I don't think we're going to see it any other way. But some of the research that we just did with Hub speaks to this. And I think it's really, really interesting. We obviously focus on the TV as that vehicle, Glenn, that you're talking about, like what's this device that the guest could use. And when we survey them, so many of our survey respondents, 80+%, either like a lot or somewhat a lot contactless check-in and check-out via the TV. So that is gaining traction, using the TV as the device for that. And then also 77% same, somewhat or like a lot keyless entry. And they all continue, more than half continue to say they want that post-pandemic. So these are things that were kind of born of the pandemic, right? Using the TV more and personal devices kind of were born out of necessity for contact experience. But the good news is that a lot of these services are actually continuing to be relevant. And so I think that's good. It's cost savings, it's improving guest satisfaction. Even room service showed an above 50% likelihood on the TV when it's available. And then on the other hand, and I'll let John speak to this if he will, there are some services that were in the vein of contactless that shouldn't continue anymore based on the data that we saw. But using the TV for those specific things, check-in, check-out, using digital key, ordering room service, those all seem to have a long life in front of them.
All right, so John, I'd love for you to respond to that. Then I've got another question for you, completely unrelated.
Sure. I was actually, Kim hit it on the head, and we see this in our research about consumer technology and consumer entertainment in general. The pandemic obviously threw everybody into upheaval. It generated a lot of brand new habits out of necessity. So things in the broader market, things like paying a bunch of money to watch at home a movie that the same day it comes out in theaters, since the theaters were closed or since a lot of people were reluctant to go to them when they were open. that's something that actually you may have noticed that still continues because people got used to watching that way, and it had some utility and some desirability outside the realm of just not catching COVID. And we've seen, as Kim mentioned, that the keyless entry, mobile check-in, mobile checkout were things that had the biggest impact on people's experience in the past, but they're also things that they are the most likely to think they want to do in the future. Things like removing high-touch items from the room or foregoing daily cleaning had a big impact during the pandemic, but they're not things that people think they need to continue to have in the future. So it's really important to differentiate between those two, so you're not spending money offering stuff that doesn't have the same value to people that it did, a year ago.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is what COVID did is really accelerated all of these trends that we saw well before the COVID crisis, John. My friends and I, who are active business travelers, we didn't want housekeeping. We're only there for a couple of few days. We didn't want the intrusion. It was useless. It wasn't worth it. I'd rather the housekeepers just not have to work as hard. But let me ask you another question, because we're getting real short on time. Do you have anything in your research that talks about how guests are thinking about using their personal devices for business and leisure? And I'm maybe thinking, security and all of that kind of stuff.
Using their personal devices for security?
No, the security so they can use their personal devices fear-free.
Yeah, so security is something that people are worried about if you ask them in a vacuum. If you say that in exchange for sharing your information, you're going to get access to this really convenient experience or really good experience, people very quickly decide, most of them do, that that's a transaction that they're willing to enter into. So they don't want to put their information at risk, but if they have to share some information or click a box that says I accept some risk in order to, for example, be able to seamlessly log into their streaming platforms while they're in a hotel room or something like that, people are willing to do that, and that's usually enough to overcome concerns they might have about privacy. We see this a lot with like smart speakers, people being paranoid about having them at home, but as soon as there's some functionality and some reason that they could have it, they're pretty eager to adopt them.
A lot of the brands tried before COVID with these systems. It was, I think, a little bit too early. I think now we're over that, which gets me thinking, John, I wasn't going to ask you this, but have you seen in the last 10 years a change in our notion of what we feel is privacy? I'm feeling like we're slowly not as concerned as some of us might have been 10, 15 years ago.
That's 100%. That's my feeling about it. We've done a lot of research on this, not necessarily on hotels in particular, but again, the people, if you say, are you worried about sharing your information with a big company, especially ones like Facebook that have had sort of a checkered past on how well they protect it or what they use it for, there's a high degree of risk for that. But at the same time, people are constantly using Facebook to check into other platforms because it's easier to use, and clicking I accept at the bottom of a big long agreement that they almost always do not read and have no idea how their stuff's being used.
That's right.
And not that I'm advocating sort of taking advantage of people's laziness in that way, but if you are offering somebody a valuable experience, if you're giving them something valuable in exchange for the information you're asking them to share, a really high percentage of people and a growing percentage of people will be willing to do that.
Yes, beautiful. We could talk about this topic for hours, but we're running real short on time. I've got to jump to some final thoughts. Dan, final thoughts, sir.
Final thoughts. I think we covered so much of it, right? The mix of people and technology is going to be with us forever, right? And we want that, and that's the desirable state. Finding the right technologies to ensure security, as John was just saying, but also to ensure easy access to exactly what you want to do next, whether you're in your room, whether you're on the property, or wherever you are. Connections to all of those other services throughout the hotel, as Kim was saying earlier. I think those are all a lot of really great opportunities, and I'm super excited about where we're going. I think there's a ton of open space to delight our guests. Yeah.
Stephanie, how about you?
Yeah, I think the building block strategy is where we're headed in helping our hotelers and owners and GMs all understand really where do you start so that you can get to that final destination and, stay current, stay on track, and make sure we're keeping up with our guest requirements.
Beautiful. John?
If I had to boil it down to one thing, it's that hotels, like lots of other companies, need to focus on simplifying this experience. People are really excited about all the entertainment options they have.
Yep.
But at the same time, they're a great need of an aggregator that pulls that all together and lets them all use it from one spot.
Great. Jeff, how about you? And also add in, are groups thinking about what's most important when it comes to either customer support technology, planning services, and stuff like that as well?
Great question. Short answer is absolutely. It's a great topic, Glenn, for your next No Vacancy Live.
Yeah, we'll get you on the show to talk about that.
Because we can bring in hybrid meetings and the importance of supporting that technology and the reliance. But the short answer is absolutely. I think the prior summed it up well. I'll just reinforce: getting the technology in place is really the first step. Making sure it works, it stays working, and delivers the expected, intended experience is critical. Don't forget the colleagues as part of this. This isn't about replacing colleagues. It's making their life easier to deliver better experiences. And then lastly, and being in the data space, I have to close on: let data drive the actionable insights to actually create and lead to better experiences. So that's it. Back to you.
All right, Kim, why don't you take us home?
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. I would also end in the same place we started, just like Jeff, which is that technology is at the root of making all of this contactless, seamless, frictionless experience better for the guests and for the hoteliers. It has to be reliable and it has to be affordable. And so I think all of the initiatives that are underway today from DirecTV and other vendors in the space are all driving towards that. On behalf of DirecTV, I just want to say thank you so much to Hotel Business for letting us sponsor this roundtable. This has been an incredible experience. Glenn, thank you so much for hosting us. You've done such an incredible job here. And to all of the partners of DirecTV's here that joined for the roundtable, thank you so much for your participation. We enjoy such wonderful, fruitful partnerships with you guys, and we look forward to much more of that in the future.
I want to thank absolutely everybody here for tuning in for this incredible learning session. You all are amazing. It was such a fast hour. In fact, we're over it right now, and I'm going to get in trouble. But Kim, thank you so much. Thank you, DirecTV Hospitality, for supporting this session and giving us a chance to share all of this great information with you. So for Jeff, Stephanie, Dan, John, and Kim, I'm Glenn. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again another time. We appreciate you. Have a great day.